Welcome to Payrock, Wyoming Spotlight on businesses and nonprofits, where we try to shine the light on local people that make our community thrive. Today we have, for the second time in the studio, we have Dave Starcevich from CopperCupCoffee. Dave and his wife Ari own CopperCup, that's located on South Ash. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. CopperCupCoffee is the go-to spot. It's a go-to coffee spot for families, for mothers. There are networking groups that meet there. There are Bible studies that meet there. And most of all, Dave and Ari are, in my opinion, what makes Casper Casper. They're an amazing family with their amazing children, and I'm very happy to have them in the studio today. Dave has actually helped me personally. He's taken my coffee, some would say coffee addiction, to another level. I think it's a coffee passion, and I finally, after 10 years of hesitation and price watching and things like that, I finally made the switch to get an espresso maker and an espresso coffee grinder, and Dave and Ari were there to just give me the knowledge, the information that I needed to get those purchases. And I'm happy to say that I enjoy the coffee at home now because of CopperCupCoffee, and I also enjoy coffee at CopperCupCoffee. So, Dave, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. It's an honor to be back again doing this with you. It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. I love bringing spotlights to people like you and like Ari out to the masses, because you have an interesting story. And let's get into that. Get into your story. So, what sparked your passion, first of all, to get into coffee?
The chemistry behind it. So I was a chemical engineer when we first started down this path. I was doing chemical work for refineries and power plants and that kind of thing, doing the sales and some consulting type work. And so I had some in-depth knowledge with chemistry and applied that to the coffee world. I don't know exactly what prompted that necessarily. Ari's kind of had the coffee bug for more of her life than me. I was never a coffee drinker, but for whatever reason, she got me hooked on it. The chemistry behind it was really interesting to me, especially the roasting and how complex the reactions are in roasting and extraction. So, there's a lot that goes into it. It was a really fascinating subject to study and to go down a rabbit hole. So we started at home. And I would experiment different ways, doing different roasts, testing different things. And we were doing cupping side by side. And, eventually we just kind of worked our way through bigger equipment, worked our way to hone the quality of our products. And, over time we kind of built a mental model up to where we can, produce quality coffee in a much shorter time. And that's what you need to really scale up to a point where you can bring it to market, and so that's how we got here.
It's true. There's art, there's science obviously involved into it too, and you don't realize it as much until you start making it yourself at home, when you try to dial in a perfect espresso, and there are a lot of complexities to it. And we take it for granted. I think when we go, we drive up and we ask for a double shot. That's what I ask for. Other people ask for lattes and all that other fancy stuff.
Yeah.
We take it for granted because it always tastes good or tastes, good quality coffee. But there's a lot into it. It's not just pushing the button and getting the percolator to drop those. That's a whole nother realm.
No. That's one of the things we've been talking about the past couple of weeks with people, just kind of randomly, is the price of coffee. And the thing is like, you could, if you could save that $5 every day that you spend on a cup of coffee by going out, you could have this much money by later in your life. It's like, yeah, but if you're going to have coffee during the day and you want it to be a good cup of coffee, you're going to have to invest in quality beans, quality equipment, quality everything that you need surrounding that process to get the quality cup that you're after.
Right.
So you're investing that money a little bit day by day by coming to us versus, trying to make that big capital investment on the front end for your own house. So
absolutely. Yeah,
you're paying for it one way or another, or you're just not drinking good coffee, or you're not drinking coffee at all. So
we don't know it until we start drinking good coffee.
Exactly.
When you start drinking good coffee, it's like, what have I been doing all my life?
Yeah.
There is a world of difference of just your drip coffee with the percolator and then a nice espresso that's pulled well,
right.
That's not bitter, that's not sour, and all these things that I've been learning over the past, I think a month and a half ago that I made my purchase. So, So
that's one of the best compliments we get often is you get people that will start using our coffee at home, and they'll run out and they'll have to go back to a bag that they had tucked back in the cupboard, or they'll go to the store and buy something that they had bought before that they used to drink regularly, and they can't go back. They end up throwing the bag away. They sulk for a while, and they end up coming back to get good coffee, and it makes a big difference. And that goes for anything. You have whiskey, beer. You find quality, and it makes it really hard to go back to something that's of a lesser quality.
No, it's true. Yeah, and you don't realize it until you taste the better, because you're used to tasting what you think is good, and then when you taste something better, that's when you realize the light comes on. And you had I'd purchased a bag of that coffee, because I also am a whiskey drinker as well, a whiskey connoisseur, taster. I don't like saying drinker, because you don't, when you enjoy whiskey, it's an ounce and a half.
That's all you need.
You take your time to enjoy the profile and the nose and things like that. And so it's definitely something that I enjoy as well. But when I purchased a bag of coffee that had some peat profile or whiskey profile, and you'd recommend it, it was definitely next level. It was good stuff.
I know. That's what one thing that's fascinating about the specialty coffee world is that the unique beans from single origins have very, very specific tasting notes, and they're all extremely unique and different. And so you can build a profile of coffee beans that fit everyone's taste profile. So from chocolates to smoky to nutty to fruity to citrusy. So you can run the whole gamut running these single origin beans, and you can find something specifically tailored for what somebody's after specifically. A lot of what you find at commodity places or in the grocery store is you're going to have beans that are either blended or roasted to a point where they become very homogeneous, and you don't get a lot of really special qualities about that coffee, and so everything starts to taste generally the same. So with the coffee that you're describing has a really nice smoky peated note, and anyone who's had a good Scotch whiskey, they taste that coffee and it pops out immediately, that peated note. Or even if you've sat in a pub in Ireland or Scotland next to one of their peat fires, that smell. It's very distinct, and so be able to pick that out in a coffee is just it's very cool.
It is. When I tasted that espresso, it was like, this reminds me of a Glenfiddich, or it reminds me of an Arbor or things like that. I hit the microphone. Sorry about that. But absolutely, it's amazing the complexities of the profile. And I think at the same time, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's some marketing to it too, when it's not done properly. And we can go to the grocery store and see, and I don't buy these, but you can see vanilla, vanilla flavors, or vanilla or chocolatey, whatever. So I think there's a marketing side to it as well that's less authentic and less truly affecting the profile.
Oh yeah, and you can see that generally so when you're typically, and this is a generality, but when you go to a grocery store, you have a lot of businesses where they put a lot of money into their marketing, into their packaging, and so they're trying to give you that visual experience, something that stands out on the shelf, and so they have to put a lot of money into their packaging to really stand out from the 6, 7, 8 other coffees that they're sitting next to. And so they put a lot into the visual aspect, where all of our coffee is in the same bag, the tasting notes are on the back. We put our time and effort into the quality of the coffee and forcing that to stand out over the marketing of fancy packaging or anything like that. Our product is going to speak for itself.
Absolutely. And I'm a believer that's for sure. So when did you know? It sounded like you started from roasting and trying things out and dabbling in the chemistry of it. But when did you know that you wanted to open a coffee shop? Because that's because from what I remember, you started roasting, selling your beans, but then the coffee shop came later. When did you know you were ready?
Well, we were blessed because we got to take part in a number of markets that take place around town. So the food for thought markets, the funky junk markets, where we had the opportunity to really bench scale test our business model and our products and bring them, without having to make a big capital investment up front. We were able to bring it to a small community in Casper, test it out, get feedback, hone that model to the point where we know that we have a product that we can bring to market and scale without having the risk of not knowing if that market is available. One of the things, a lot of times that businesses will run into is they'll go to market before knowing even if there's a market available to sell a product, regardless of the quality or anything else that takes place before that. If there's no market, it's not going to sell. So we were blessed in that sense that we got to partake in some of these smaller markets as a bench top to test what we were working on.
What about the name? What's the story behind the name? CopperCup is a unique name.
Yeah. See, that's a fascinating story. So my family is from Butte, Montana, and Butte, Montana's got a really rich history in America. They were the copper center of the world for a very long time, especially at the beginning of the electrification across the country. And so most all of the copper across the country was coming from Butte, Montana. And so a lot of wealth was generated there. There was a lot of work. So a lot of the immigrants that were coming to the country in the late 1800s and early 1900s were being sent to Butte and a lot of the mines along the way. But, a lot of them ended up there as well to work in the underground copper mines. And so that's a rich part of the Butte history there. And so I went to school in Butte, Montana. I went to college there. My family is from there, and so I've always had a really soft spot in my heart for Butte. And so when I met Ari, we kind of continued started our relationship there, really. So we got married there. We spent a lot of time there, and so it's kind of an homage to the historic ambiance of Butte, Montana is really where it comes from.
So it was a small mining town.
And it wasn't small back in the day. It was a very large town. I mean, it was 100,000 known about people, and probably 3 times that unknown about people. So it was a very highly dense, had a very high population density, and was just an immense importance to the country back in the early 1900s for sure.
Interesting. And so you brought that down here, that homage to the past, but also that family feel, because you mentioned that in our first podcast that we did that that's one thing that stood out to you, is that it's a family environment.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that you find there. So the communities that are built of, the immigrants from the past, a lot of them were segregated into little communities. And so you would have the Finns in one spot, the Yugoslavians in another spot, the Polish, the Chinese, the Mexicans. So they would all have their own little neighborhoods. And so there was a really tight community bond between them. And as they melded together over the years, they ended up, this was at a time when the unions were really big and important, because the mining conditions back in the day were fairly atrocious. And so there was a big need for unions back then. And so there was a lot of that to bring those people together. And when there were strikes and nobody was getting paid, there was a lot of bonding between people and community to support each other, to care for each other. And so a lot of that you still find there. There's still a lot of, a really thick community support structure that's in place, and they really look out for one another. It's just a really nice thing that, if we're able to export and to bring to Casper and, provide some of that community culture, I think is beneficial to everybody.
And it's beneficial, but everyone sees it. I mean, they know that this is like I said in the intro, it's the go-to spot for families, for mothers, for children. There's that play area in the back. It definitely has that family environment. Absolutely. You've definitely brought that into the business model. It's not just about selling coffee. It's about creating those relationships. And
right.
I mean, when I walk in there and they say, "Hi, Eric, how are you?" It's like, it's totally different. It's a different vibe, and it's definitely what you're aiming to accomplish, you're accomplishing, and I love that.
Everybody should walk in feeling like Norm from Friends. Yeah.
Cheers from Cheers.
Or Cheers. Sorry.
Yeah.
Cheers. Yeah.
That dates us because Friends was.
Yeah. Right. Cheers.
Cheers. A little further back, but I watched that one. So let's talk about the roasting process. Do you select those beans from a specific source? It's single origin. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so most of our coffees are single origin. We do blends, and I've been putting together a number of blends for certain occasions, and that's a lot of fun too. But the single origins is fun because you get to really encapsulate the work that takes place and the thought and the kind of the culture where these beans come from. So anywhere from South America, Central America, to Africa, to Indonesia. We get our beans from all around the world, wherever coffee grows. And so each of them are going to have a very unique personality to them. And to be able to really showcase that for the people who grow them, I think is a very nice thing to do. And it's kind of honor thing in that sense. But yeah, we do blends too. There's a lot of coffees that pair really nice together that you can really do some fun things with. If you're doing something that's you're trying to reach a more general, broad public, you can blend some stuff together that's going to temper down some of the really specific notes, but really and try to make things a little more general and smooth for a broad audience. So for example, like we've been doing some fundraiser work where we're marketing our bags for certain events or whatever. And, for that type of application, it's nice to have a more broad flavor profile that a lot more people will appreciate. And then as they come in and they, experience that quality, you can start to tailor coffees more to their individual wants.
What's the future of specialty coffee? What does that look like? Because you're speaking about, you're not speaking about going to the store and getting a bag of Folgers, cough,
Mm-hmm.
but you're talking about specialty coffee. What's the future? Are things changing in that dynamic?
Yeah, that's the growing part of the coffee industry right now. I think you're seeing a lot of demand towards more quality for that. And this is just going off general statistics online, but you can generally see it in the culture here too. There's a lot of people who really want that next step in quality. They're already paying for coffee. They want that money to go towards something that's more quality. And so I think that's the general trend in specialty coffee is growth over time. A few percent per year probably is what you'll see online, but I mean the market is there to grow faster than that, I think, as well. I think it's an education thing. There's a lot of people that haven't experienced it, but when they do, I think you're going to see that growth rate increase.
On a personal level, have you seen growth in your business since you opened it?
Oh yeah, definitely. And this is something that we've talked about in the shop too. But our general marketing ethos is word of mouth. In my experience, that's the most effective marketing for predictable, sustainable, predictable growth. And so we're able to make changes and to plan things more effectively based on a nice, steady, sustainable growth pattern. And so word of mouth is just a really effective way to do that. And so that lets us focus on the quality and taking care of our customers and being, really over the top on our service and making people feel special. And so that way, we're promoting them to go out and talk about us in the community and bring the next set of people in. And, we continue that trend, but we're not, we don't plan for big spikes. We don't plan for big dips. Our goal is nice, sustainable growth that we can manage. And that way everyone's getting the service that they deserve, and we're not, leaving people short or leaving people waiting or,
Right. Experience definitely sells. The experience that people have when they go into any restaurant, any coffee shop, any store, that experience is what sells. That has them coming back for another cup of coffee or for another conversation or for another whatever it is. So the experience, you're absolutely right, and that's all also word of mouth. It's the sharing your experience with someone else, and then like as many times as I can, I'll bring in meetings that I have in the business world over there and have them experience what I've experienced. Right. And I think that sells, because when someone else can say, this place gets my coffee right every time, or this place talks to me, it's not, I'm not just a number. It's not because they write my name on the cup that they know me.
Exactly.
But I think the experience is what sells, especially in our town, especially in Casper, when we're a small town, where we're a family-oriented town. That relationship, that experience is what keeps businesses growing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's a book out there, and I believe, I forget the title, I believe is Unreasonable Hospitality or something along those lines. And the general idea of the book is in the title. Just go over the top for your customers, make them feel important, make them feel special, take interest in their lives. Those are just fundamental, being a good person, being interested in other people, and building those relationships on a one-on-one basis, not treating them like marketing numbers, not treating them as, a sales pitch or whatever. Take general interest, build genuine, authentic relationships with people. That's what's going to work long-term, that's going to be sustainable over a long period of time.
Absolutely. Outside of coffee, how do you maintain that work-life balance? Are there things that you do outside of coffee or outside of the office?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things this is kind of taken over most of the hours of the day. In general, we're waking up about 4:30, and pretty much getting after it all day until about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And so between the business and then managing 3 kids and their schedules, it's a pretty full day. I would say, 16 hours is spent pretty well, on the go, and there's not a ton of breaks. We might find a little few hour gap here and there, but it's not much. I'm getting crap for this already, but doing this podcast, I'm missing the workout I'm supposed to be doing right now. So, that's my one getaway, is trying to break out of here to go work out at 11 o'clock with the guys. And so that's a lot of fun, but
sorry guys, if I'm taking him away from his workout session.
Yeah.
But he doesn't need it.
I was getting it this morning for sure.
Dave doesn't need a workout. So
we got that. Ari and I have been setting some time aside to go out with one another. So we'll drop the kids off at a babysitter and get out and spend some time together. And that's been super helpful. That's been something recent that we've started doing, and that we've been able to do now that we weren't necessarily able to do, a few months ago. So I'm super thankful for that. Getting to spend time with her has been awesome. So
happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, exactly. I know, and she's got me working on house projects right now, finishing up. So we actually live in the back of the coffee shop, and so it's our home as well. And so when we bought that property, we gutted and refinished the back as well. And typical, me, I start the project, get it most of the way done, and then we've got doors and trim to finish. And so she's got me putting in doors and finishing trim and just getting some finishing stuff done with the house. So even though we're doing all this, you still gotta do the housework too.
You do, because you want to come home to something that you want to feel comfortable in as well.
Yeah, and it makes a big difference. Like having that comfortable spot to land, at the end of the day, it does re-energize you, and you can tell. Like when Ari and I take time to work on the house and give ourselves a space where we can relax and take a minute, you can see an improvement in our performance, the next day. It's very worth it.
Right.
Yep.
So, we talk about work-life balance, but at the same time, what I notice when you are there is that your kids do have, a huge priority in your life, and they'll run up to you, and and you'll talk to them, and it's not just business. Obviously, you're taking care of your customers, but you're a family that runs this business. And so that's a differentiator as well. And people have to know that. I've gone there, and people have been to drive up, and Ari's had one of the kids on her hip and pulling a shot for a customer. That's just what it is, because you're a family that runs a business. It's not just a Dave and Ari and their hobby. Your kids are involved.
Right. That's 100%. They at the end of the day, they're the ultimate priority, and they're a part of the business. We make them a part of what we're doing. One of the biggest lies that people have been told a lot is that business isn't personal. Well, that's a load of crap. Business is ultimately personal. That's that's your life, that's your livelihood, and that's at the end of the day, that's what you pass down to your next generation too. So you're developing skills, you're developing habits, you're providing learning opportunities, making connections, showing them what a good relationship looks like. So there's a lot of learning that takes place that they're able to see just by being there and absorbing it in. Every day is super important. So
absolutely,
I think there's a lot of value to that. It's something I'm thankful that we have the opportunity to share with them, and regardless of their feelings now, one day when they look back, hopefully they get to say, we got to learn a lot of cool stuff. We work hard now because of how we saw mom and dad work that hard, back then. So
the 12, 16-hour days, we saw dad and mom do it. So absolutely. And I think it's also a testament to your growth as well, because you're from what I'm understanding, you're seeing growth in your business, which means people are coming back for repeat business. People are getting to know, who CopperCup is, and so they're accepting that value that you have. That family is important, and your family is important. Their family is important, and so that is again a testament to the growth that's there, but also that people are recognizing it and prioritizing. That's the family I want to support in this community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Casper in general, the people are willing to go out and support, a local person. I think they're willing to drive the extra mile to do that. I think just making them aware that you exist, and once they hear your name a couple of times from trusted sources that they have, or friends or family or whatever, once they have that trusted source that pushes them over the precipice to come in and visit us, once that first visit is made, it's locked in. We're going to treat them like a special customer. They're going to get the treatment and a quality product, and once they go back to anything else, it's gonna fall short, and that's how you keep a customer long term. Yeah.
Casper is a very community focused town, and I know that you and Ari are involved in community things more and more. There's the jogging that you do, I think, once a week. Talk
No,
to
not
us.
me. That's Ari's job. Yeah. You've got a camera on me. They'll know that you're lying.
you in the sense of you and Ari.
Yeah.
You have that jogging. But talk to us about your community action. What are you doing? How are you involved in the community? Because I see that the deliveries. Delivery is, yes, it's business oriented, but you're delivering and you're spotlighting the fact that you're bringing it to schools. You're bringing it to different. Tell us about your what you do outside of CopperCup.
Sure. So. Yeah, we like to take care of schools. So when they put in an order for delivery, it's Ari who's hand delivering those coffees to the school. Usually she's loading up, at least 2 of the kids to bring out there and help deliver coffee. And so that's nice. That's a nice personal touch. She does the run club on Sunday mornings where she's able to get, a group of people together to go out and run, and they come back and chat for a while. There's a number of moms groups that come in that really support our local mothers and help them with their young kids and stuff like that. So we support those type of groups. Recently we did a big fundraiser for Park Elementary where we put together a blend for them, and then their parents group gave all the school kids a form to sell to the community and to raise money for their school. And they ended up selling 560 pounds of coffee in a week. And so that was massively successful for those guys. And, they were able to make some money doing it and, support a local fundraising, business, which was cool. And we're very thankful for them and happy to see their success. So we've been helping a women's addiction clinic, Fireside Collective. So we did put together a blend for them as well. And these are all fun little things that we get to do because we get to bring in the people and do a full-scale coffee tasting with them where we send out single roast, we send out blends, and we're able to sit down and taste with them and determine things that they like. It's a fun project for them to work on too. We're able to brand our bags to help, communicate their message and, spotlight them and what they're doing. So it's a fun thing that we're able to do. So
that's great. Shout out to Ashley over there at Fireside Collective.
Yeah, they've been great. Absolutely great. It sounds like they had a huge success at Hope Church too. So that was really cool to hear about to be a part of that. So
that's wonderful. Talking about the community, what are the biggest challenges that you think that Casper is facing today when we're talking about what's happening economically or politically? What are the challenges that you're facing as a business owner in Casper?
I think it's probably the challenges that everyone's facing. There is a big shortage in the labor pool, and so finding good quality help consistently and for a long term is difficult for everybody. I think that there's a lot of mobility for a lot of people right now, which is good from their point of view. That, they're able to switch jobs and improve their position. From a business point of view, that is tough because you invest a lot into bringing people on as far as onboarding and training and, just investing in getting them to where they need to be to do whatever, the job is. And this applies to anything. And so when they leave in a couple of months, you have to start that process all over again. That's a big sink of not just your time and your money. It chews up a lot of bandwidth. And so,
absolutely,
there's been a number of times where, we've lost people and that puts us back behind the bar working and not doing, business-oriented tasks as far as, the administrative work and ordering and, just the stuff that takes place behind the scenes too. So I think that's a big challenge. I don't think that's just Casper necessarily. I think that applies pretty much everywhere at this point. And there's a lot of demographic stuff, changes taking place right now where you have some large older generations that are kind of moving on and then some smaller younger generations. And there's just some gaps that we're trying to figure out how to fill as a country that it's probably going to be tough for a while, but yeah.
When we talk about economic growth of a city, for Casper, for example, a lot of people, we're divided on, who's responsible for that growth. A lot of people will look at city council, they'll look at the mayor, they'll look at politics, and other people will look at businesses. What are your thoughts? Who is more responsible, or who is what is a small business like yours, how is it responsible for the growth of the economy here in Casper?
Yeah, I mean, if you're concerned about the health of your community, the ownership comes down to every individual. This is a community is made up of a batch of individuals, and it's on each individual to make that community better. And so if you need to start a business, or if you need to whatever you feel needs to be done, it's on you to go do it. You can't depend on government. You can't depend on someone else to do the thing. It's on each individual person to do whatever that it is that you feel is important. So, a lot of people have a lot of ideas, but there's not a lot of people willing to put in the work and the time and the money to go out and make that change. And
right.
I think they said everyone sits around and waits for it to be done. It's just not going to happen that way. Right. So it's a function of inspiring a lot of individuals. It's never going to be a function of government doing anything. It's never going to be a function of, what can a business owner do for the rest of the community. It doesn't work that way. If you have a great idea, you need to find a way to bring it to market. If you want to see a change, you've got to push it forward. If you want, something to stay the same, you've got to be the one standing there in between whatever else is trying to change it. So,
right. Creating jobs, creating employment,
yeah.
Even paying taxes.
Yeah.
That aspect. Even taxes are maybe controversial, but paying taxes in order to do your fair share in supporting this community. When we talk about infrastructure, that is more on the side of how city council and how the mayor will decide how to allocate those funds. What could Casper do, in your opinion, to improve infrastructure that would have an effect on your business?
That's an interesting question. I think there's, and this is just speaking broadly, but the general traffic patterns of Casper are a little odd. So when you compare the general traffic patterns and just the city layout to a lot of successful cities, there's a lot of differences. So if you were to compare Casper to, say, like a Fort Collins, for example, you can see that the streets are set up and the business areas are set up in a way that, service certain activities. So in Fort Collins, where you have like the localized downtown area where you have your bars, your restaurants, your shopping, you have the parking to support that. You have the infrastructure in place for people to get there, number one, park, do whatever it is they're out to do, spend the money, and then move on. They also have other parts of town that are more commercialized, where you have the larger parking lot that's privately owned. You can the strip malls, that kind of thing, but they have them localized on certain streets, and Casper's tough because it is kind of spread out throughout town. You've got a pretty broad area where you've got a lot of things that are kind of scattered about, so you don't really have that localized gathering point. And I think they've done a good job in bringing the downtown up dramatically. From when I was a kid, there wasn't a lot of reason to go downtown Casper. We would come here for events, state sports and all that, but there wasn't a lot of reason to go downtown Casper. But they've done a really nice job in really upping the game of downtown Casper, and I hope that trend continues, especially from an event planning standpoint, and really forcing people or giving them an excuse to get downtown to go do something, whether that's music or art or farmers markets, whatever the case is. Really leaning into those type of things and providing people the excuse to go downtown, because that foot traffic and that vehicle traffic is what drives people into the community down there. So
it's a good point. It's true that when you talk about downtown Casper, it's hard to always imagine what we're talking about, but it's true the South David area, Center Street, and 2nd Street, that is officially obviously the downtown area, but 2nd Street, spans the entire city. So it's true. Some things they probably couldn't improve on because just how the city grew and things like that. Right. But you mentioned traffic patterns, and it is a constant thing that I hear or that I read online, is that just last week someone was complaining about a 6-minute hold pattern on a red light. That's a long time for Casper. Yeah. 6 minutes is a lot. And even the other day we were driving and we were at a light that stayed, I think, for at least two minutes. Even 2 minutes is a long time. So I think traffic patterns could probably help. Infrastructure, I would assume it's probably based on how Casper grew over the past 50 years. Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, every community faces that challenge. Is how do you grow? How do you grow efficiently? How do you build up your infrastructure underneath stuff that's already built? It's not an easy task, and I'm not even sure that there's a great answer on how to do it a lot of the time. But you look at limitations of any place, and that's what it comes down to. It's Wyoming people don't like getting out of their car. They don't like walking very far, and so you kind of you have some hurdles with just the general culture of Wyoming that you have to put up with. It's windy, it's cold, and
right.
That's just the way it is. So
it's a population deterrent, and I think that's not necessarily a negative thing.
No, no,
the wind, the snow.
No, it has its advantages for sure. But you have to take that into account. When you have a business and you want it to be successful, you've got to put yourself in the customer's shoes. Mm-hmm. I'm as guilty as anybody. If I have to park a block away or I have to walk a little bit, how much do I really want that thing?
Right. So, you keep driving around. Yesterday,
yeah, you keep driving around. Right? See who pulls out.
3
exactly.
times. Because I didn't want to carry all the stuff I had in my hands. 2 blocks. I kept driving. I still had to.
Exactly. But when you're planning a business, it's super important to put yourself in those shoes and realize how important it is to people, mm-hmm. your customers, that mm-hmm. they have access to a close parking spot, that they don't have to walk a long ways. And so when you look at some of the limitations, Casper-wise, there are some parking limitations. There's, obviously if you're depending on foot traffic, people aren't walking a long ways here. Mm-hmm. It's just not part of what we do. It's,
mm-hmm. Do you think that local government is responsible for the success of small business?
No. I think local business is responsible for the success of small business.
So we can't count on local government to help small businesses?
They can help. No, they can certainly help. And I'm very appreciative when they do help, but they don't carry the risk and they don't carry the reward. They are there to help and support, and we should all be very grateful for that. But they're not a scapegoat, and they're not when a business fails, the government's not the reason the business failed. You've got to find a way around that. You got to think outside the box. There is a lot of government resources available. They really do go out of their way to help you a lot of the time, and there's a lot of resources available for you. Reaching out to the right people can be tough, and finding out how to get to those people maybe sometimes can be a challenge. But from my experience, the resources are out there, and they're more than willing to help you succeed. But yeah, one of the things as a business owner is you don't get the excuses. You really it's on you to succeed. Mm-hmm. There's no other excuse.
So how important is it for you, for businesses or small business owners, to be civically involved in what's happening in our town?
I think they provide a lot of insight. I mean, obviously they have a lot of data on what's going on in the market, just talking to them and seeing how their business how their business health is, and expanding that to the local health is super useful. Mm-hmm. And so they've done a lot of things. They've wore a lot of hats. So they're familiar with accounting. They're familiar with business. They're familiar with rules and regulations. So they do everything. The small business people have a lot of info and a lot of insight that's super valuable. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, they should be more involved. And this is where Ari and I are guilty, and we're just now starting to really get to the point where we need to set aside some time to get more involved and to be a part of that conversation, because mm-hmm. When you cede that position to somebody else, then you don't get to complain about the outcome of it. So going back to the individual responsibility, it's on you to be a part of that community, and if you have a certain feeling on something, you got to be the one to step up and say it. So that's one thing that we mm-hmm. hope to be better at in the coming years. Right. Is just providing some knowledge, providing whatever it is we have to the community, and being there to support other people. I think it would be super valuable. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. Is we shouldn't be complaining if we're not involved in the change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are groups.
And it goes past voting too. You don't get to show up once a year and vote and say that you've taken part in government. That's not how that works.
That is so true. You're right. And because then you're going to spend the next 4 years saying it's not my fault, it's someone else's fault, and you're passing the buck. Yeah. Every time we use that excuse of I voted, you're passing the buck. It's like, what are you doing today? You did that last November in 2016 or whatever. The last time you ever voted, maybe it was 2012, but what have you been doing since then to change it today?
Exactly.
Because whoever's in office, we're always saying, I didn't vote for him or I voted for him. It's not what I wanted. We're always passing the buck.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, see, the beautiful thing about our government and the way it's set up, top to bottom, is even regardless of who's in office, there are still things in place that you can take part of to still influence how things move into the future, regardless of who's in office. I mean, if you're actively going to take part in government, then you still carry a lot of weight, regardless of who's in office. But again, it's a function of effort and energy. And if you can complain about all you want, but if it's not that important to you, you're probably not going to take part. So, you have to have that internal conversation of how important is this thing to me, and if it's that important, then you need to find a way to influence that decision.
Absolutely. And I think if it was that simple, that if a Democrat is in power, then small business owners will fail. It's not that simple, and it's not because you're a Republican or you have these values that's when you're going to find success. It's not that simple.
Right. Now, I mean, there are some things like, you do get to a point where there is some break even. At some point, big government does play a role. Just for example, there's a lot of, this isn't necessarily in Wyoming, but a lot of other places are, where they want to force minimum wages of, certain values, and it's an ever increasing value. That's all fine and great, but you gotta, look at it from both ends of the spectrum. So you have, employee X who's getting, a big pay raise, but on the other end, that money's leaving some business guy's pocket, and at some point there's a break even there of, well, it's no longer viable to have the business, and so your whole economy starts to slow down, or that employee is either cut or their hours are cut just to keep the business afloat. And so there's a balance there and there's a lot of nuance that I don't think really gets taken into account. So, unfortunately, a lot of that benefit leans towards bigger corporations, bigger companies who have the infrastructure and the revenue to support higher wages. The smaller businesses, the local oriented businesses don't necessarily have that. A lot of times they're operating on the thin margins. They still they make good money, but it's thin margins. And when you are increasing their wages, their number one or number two usually biggest buckets in their costs, that's a big deal. And so you're talking about the viability of an entire business based off of that decision.
And I think that's why going back to dialogue is important, because I think that it's all about perspective. And a lot of times we don't have that perspective and we're just listening to one person. As a business owner, if we're required to increase our wages, then it could be a detriment to the livelihood of the business itself, and then the business has to shut down. And then from the other point of view, it's like we need to value our customer or our employees, and like you said earlier off the podcast, that there are people that you're going to incentivize. You're going to give them a pay raise because of their involvement or because of their passion for what they're doing. So there is that balance. It's not, and that's why open dialogue is important. Not mandating the increase of wages, but not relegating it to maybe stingy business owners. I mean, dialogue needs to happen.
And there's always that pull back and forth. I mean, you can't have complete anarchy on one side, because there's a lot of shady stuff that happens over there. We talked briefly about the history of Butte, and there's a lot of people that get taken advantage of in that situation too. You do have to view it from both sides though, and unfortunately what's happening more and more right now is you get a lot of views on that type of subject, but this applies to other things as well, where it's getting viewed from one side of the argument, not the other. And so you don't get that good nuanced conversation that helps you find a middle ground, that helps you find a productive way to do things. And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, the wage conversation, that's something that's very market self-correcting. If you're not paying enough, your employees are going to leave and go do something else that pays better. And, you're incentivized at that point to pay more to keep better employees. So
absolutely.
That's kind of the self-correcting nature of the market. So
how is the current political climate affecting or fostering risk-taking or hindering risk-taking for small businesses like yours? Because the political climate does affect our outlook.
Yeah, it does, and I think unfortunately a lot of it's more perceived than it probably is actual. I don't really base my business decisions on what's going on at the federal level that much. I'm fairly a risk-on person. I don't mind more risk than most people would tolerate in their portfolios. I find index investing and 401k investing kind of boring, if I'm honest. It's just not very exciting to me. So a lot of people, they like their 6 to 10% return year after year, and they're going to work 30, 40 years, and at the end they'll have their retirement fund. All things considered, and That's just not something I'm very interested in. I don't have a lot of interest in retirement. I don't have a lot of interest in late in life golfing. I don't like golf. So, I just prefer to do things that are value added now. I like to invest in the community. I'd like to take that risk. Taking that risk is more important to me than the not risk of an index fund.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there a balance between the regulation that the government can impose, whether it's local or federal regulation, and then the freedom that we need as Americans to run a business?
Well, and that's this is one place where and this is a kind of a country issue, but there's been a lot of overreach on the federal level, more and more, and that's been kind of a trend for a long time. What you would hope is that the legislator, so our state legislator, would, be more in power than they are. A lot of that has been ceded over to the executive branch of the government. So they write, the legislator will write very general rules, and that allows the executive to implement them how they wish. Well, that creates a lot of problems for a lot of people because there's not a lot of definition on those rules, and there's a lot of nuance, and so you lose the ability to function in a society where you don't understand the rules of the game, unfortunately. And so the way that was meant to be handled was a lot of more states. So the legislator was meant to make general rules, and then it would fall to the states to make their own more specific rules. So as you move down the government structure, those rules are supposed to become more and more specific until you get down to your community level, where there's very well-defined rules that work for your community. And unfortunately, a lot of that has been ceded up and up and up to the point where it's, there's a lot of stuff that's been ceded up to the executive branch of the federal government, but that's not super productive because then you don't have a lot of definition. You don't have a lot of ways, like you don't know the rules of the game as well, as opposed to investing your time and your energy into the local government, understanding the local and state structure and what you can do to implement your state fences. So one thing that protects you as a business is having a really strong state and local government that's willing to stand up and has the backbone to stand up to the federal government's rules and overreach, and to draw the line and say, we won't comply with that because it's overreach. It's not constitutional. It violates our citizens' rights. And until you get more and more states that are willing to stand up and say, no, we are protecting our state citizens first, you're going to have that overreach that continues to hamper small businesses. Well, it hampers everybody, unfortunately. But
there's been cases in the last couple of years where, minor cases, important, valuable cases, but where it's been brought back to the state level to make decisions that were decided on a federal level. So, but I totally agree with you that the states need more autonomy because no one knows. But
they have to have the backbone to demand it back.
They do.
And so same thing with the legislator. They need to be doing a better job of demanding back their power from the executive branch. But unfortunately, with that responsibility becomes the accountability, and nobody wants accountability anymore. And so a lot of that, to avoid accountability, they turn the responsibility over to, more and more, this has become a trend where they turn that over to one guy who's the president, which is crazy.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
his bureaucratic structure underneath him.
No matter who it is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what political slant. You're absolutely right. And I think that we do have some congressmen that are willing to take that responsibility and be accountable, but it's few and far between.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. There's it's not just one solution that's going to fix it, because no one knows Casper better than a Casper native. There's no one knows Wyoming better than a Wyomingite.
Right.
And you can't expect Washington, that's thousands of miles away, to make decisions on what happens in Sheridan or Midwest or things like that. So you're absolutely right. I think there's state level autonomy needs to increase, but we can't have that increase if we don't have people that are accountable.
And one thing that goes along with that too, and so in a more connected world that we live in, Wyoming is dependent on every other state around us and states along the coast, and so there's a lot of interdependence on states, and so there is a role for that federal, oversight, but there's also a role for the cooperation of states too. It needs to be a responsibility of the states to work with other states as well. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of interstate travel, you have a lot of interstate freight, you have, all of our economies are intertwined, and so it's very, very important that, the states are working together. So you can't be completely federalist and, lock yourself in a box. You have to have a little bit of oversight, and so that all the states are playing the same game.
You do.
But They need to be very specific, and they need to be just light enough to make the game fair, but then it needs to be on the states to work together and to negotiate their own way forward. So,
no, it's very true. And I've my oldest son has a degree in economics, and we talk about antitrust quite often. And it's a concept that's similar. I've always been pro small government, and if I would vote libertarian, I definitely would, because those values are important to me. But oftentimes that's a lost vote, unfortunately, with our current political system. But through conversations with him, I've realized that yes, we can be freedom focused and state given state autonomy, but we still need regulation. We still need a government body to look at things in business in regard to antitrust and monopolies that grow too much. Fortunately, they broke up AT&T, and now we have all these smaller companies that are growing in quality, but because of that, it drove the prices down. And so there is a positive economic impact to government regulation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it goes back to the amount of regulation. And do you think,
and not just regulation, but involvement too? Like a lot of these projects are done with government money, government support. So the government invests in a lot of these projects too. So the government has a role to play both locally, federally, on a state level. Like that cooperation between business and government and its citizens is very important. And you got to give the devil its due. A lot of our technological success comes from government funding to scale good ideas that come from business. A lot of it, you have to have that marriage to make it work. But at the end of the day, you have to incorporate the free market, and really that needs to be the driver, not the damper pulling back on the wheel. So,
what about trade policies? Because that obviously has an impact on local businesses like yours, especially when you're sourcing from Guatemala or Ethiopia. How do those trade policies and globalization affect or hinder what your business?
So yeah, now you're talking almost worldwide politics, which is super interesting. So to bring it back to a coffee example. Coffee is really fascinating because almost all coffee comes from third world countries that are, lack a lot of infrastructure. They lack a lot of funding. They lack a lot of ability to scale their farms and processes so that they can be more economic and more profitable. And so from a coffee standpoint, what you end up with is a lot of really individual farms, and they pool together into these processing plants typically, where they'll take a lot of farmers' coffee, pool it, and then it'll process there, and then it will change hands through a whole chain of custody through shipping all the way to us, the roasters. And so there's a number of hands that take place there, and it's a very complicated system. And that's one thing that I don't know that most people give a lot of gratitude towards, is how sophisticated and complicated our shipping and transportation system is globally. It's unbelievable. To give an appreciation to click buy now on an Amazon website and to have that thing delivered is just an absolute miracle of God. And if anyone had the idea of how much goes into that system, it's just unbelievable. So from the coffee world, I mean, you're talking about a pound of coffee that changes hands, maybe 5, 6, 8 times. I have no idea, but it changes hands a number of times. So there's a lot of steps in between there, and that's the case for everything. Every piece of technology that we use is assembled in a plant, but that plant buys certain small pieces from every other little plant. Same with our military. They have say they're building a jet or a tank or whatever, but that tank and that jet or whatever is all manufactured from parts that come from all 50 states. And so this is a very complex web of economy that takes place. It's extremely sophisticated. It's fascinating to think about, because you look back at like the communist economic planning and all that, and you're trying to put a handful of people or a single person in charge of planning these complex economic systems, and it's overwhelmingly complicated. I don't even know how an AI would keep up with that complicated of computation. So the way the free market works is it basically distributes that computation across all the people to determine price and demand and supply, and it works beautifully. So that distributed computation across all people is just a awesome thing that makes the free market a really, really valuable asset.
So do you think there's enough regulation in that process? Because when you're sourcing things from another country, is there too much regulation? Would obviously profits would increase if there was less regulation and less hands involved than if you could order directly from the local producer in Guatemala and have it directly shipped to you here on South Ash. You'd probably you'd see profits increase.
Right.
But we need the regulation. So do you think that the regulation is at an adequate level for what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, that's hard to say, and I'm sure it's a sliding scale. I mean, we're very happy with the coffee that we get. That's brought into multiple ports in the U.S. and it comes in sorted and cleaned. They bring it to their local warehouse and sort it and clean it again. And so the coffee that we get has been cleaned and sorted a couple times at
Laundered.
least. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm very happy with that aspect of things. But yeah, as far as how much regulation or how little, that's always a sliding scale. And, a lot of that's determined on the situation too. Going back to the conversation of how does one person or a group of people determine how much regulation is needed for every single situation, when you have situations that change daily or hourly, it's you can't compute that. Yeah. So the more the general sense should be to lean into the free market as much as possible. And to use regulation as little as possible, but with as much definition as possible. So,
what about before we get back into coffee? What about I'm curious about tax policy. How does current tax policies how are they affecting your small business? And you think that could we see improvement on how the federal government imposes tax regulations on small businesses?
It's fun working in a coffee shop because a lot of the people that we hire are younger, and for some of them it's a lot of first paychecks or the first paycheck, and you get to see their eyes widen when they are anticipating one number on their check and they see a much lower amount. Right. And they get to learn about taxes firsthand. That's always a fun experience. So I can appreciate taxes when where they're going is supporting your community, supporting your state, and building out your infrastructure. You are paying into a system with the expectation that it's going to yield returns for your community. So we pay taxes, and our expectation is, okay, that's going to go to a road or a sewer system or to a development project that's going to support the community. It's going to open the grounds for more business development. It's going to open the grounds for housing, whatever the case may be. And that applies to the national level too. The taxes we pay in, they need to be, our expectation is that those taxes are spent on things that support our country, essentially. And so when you see tax money and spending being squandered, throughout the world and on, we don't even know what. I mean, there's so much money that changes hands through that. It's hard to point to any specifics, but you just have that general sense that your tax money is not being spent wisely. That's the frustrating thing for people, I think. I don't think anybody has an issue paying taxes. I think their issue is, are you spending that money wisely?
That's a good point.
The unfortunate thing about our economy right now, though, the spending is not driven by tax revenue. It's we spend the money first, we print the money, and then the tax is the damper that we use to fight inflation.
Right.
So you have one lever that we spend the money as much as possible to inflate the dollar on whatever projects we're working on, and that boosts the economy. And then we implement taxes as much as we need to damper the economy down, to drive inflation down when it's too much. And so those are the levers that the legislator has. And unfortunately, they seem to lean more and more on the spending side and less on the taxing side of their equation. And that's where you get the inflation that we see. And then you're leaning on the Federal Reserve to dampen inflation with a bank rate, and that's it's too slow. It's not a heavy hammer enough, and it inhibits business. That's the other thing. It's like if you want business and you want to support a growing economy, increasing the rate of capital is probably not the way to do it.
This has been a very Joe Rogan-esque type.
Yeah.
I think we could get into another hour of conversations. A lot more things I'd like to get into. But if we just transition back into Copper Cup, what's your vision for the future of Copper Cup Coffee here in Casper?
Well, in the near future, we just purchased a coffee cart today, and the goal there is to be servicing events and supporting people and businesses, and being able to set up on small areas that it's a self-sustained cart that we can support people, businesses, events, that kind of thing, where we'll have an espresso machine and be able to bring a full coffee service anywhere, mobile. So that we're looking forward to that.
That's great.
We've been leaning more into the food and deli side of things, and so that's been pretty exciting. And long-term growth, I think we would like to expand the business into a second location at some point, but we want to make sure that it's the right location, the right spot, and that all the numbers work out and are able to support a second location. That would be a big investment.
So what are your final thoughts? If you could share something to Casper from a small business point of view from CopperCupCoffee, what would you like to tell the Casperites that are listening to this 1 hour podcast?
We're very grateful for the people at Casper. They've been unbelievably supportive. Them choosing to do business with us has been awesome. It's supported me. It supports my family, and we're able to reinvest in the community too. So my wife and I we spend our money just like everyone else too, and so when we do, we try to spread it around Casper as much as we can, and so the money that comes in goes right back into the community, and so we're just very appreciative for everybody, and we hope to keep growing and to keep supporting as many people as we can. So
it's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Dave, and thank you for joining us on this last on this podcast, not the last podcast, but on this. Make sure to like and subscribe and share this podcast, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with another one.